Today is January 1st, 2000, and this is Robert, and I'm here to interview Trudy, and we're going to ask her a lot of questions about her past and about what the future holds for her. So Trudy, I'd like to start with asking you, when and where were you born?
I was born in Hodgenville, which is Ruhr County, at the 1912, February the 10th, 1912.
And what was the name that was on your birth certificate?
Baby girl,
Why was that?
because the snow was so deep, and when the doctor left, they hadn't named me, and so then I guess they just forgot about it. And I didn't find out what a name I had until I was 65, and I was sorry to hear that. I wished I would have had me a pretty name, Gertrude. I said that belonged to a doggy.
Why did you find out at age 65?
I went to the see about my social security.
And so your birth certificate just said baby girl, and so you had been going around thinking you were Gertrude.
That's what my grandchildren called me when I took care of them, baby girl.
That's right. Can you tell me about your parents and their age difference?
Well, my father was in his probably late 50s, and my mother was just 17. Her mother died, and she lived with her father, who wasn't very good to her. So when my daddy came along, which is my daddy now, she came and was his wife because she wanted to get away from home. That made the difference in the age. And my father was married before he married my mother, and he had 12 children. I don't even know their name. I didn't get to see all of them. And then after Mama and Papa married, there were 8 of us.
What did he do for a living?
He was a preacher. He rode a horse and went to his church and rode the horse.
Well, you said you had, there were 8 of you. Can you
Yeah.
tell me the names of your brothers and sisters from the oldest to the youngest?
Yes, my oldest was Bernie, and then my sister was the second, and then my brother Henry was the third, and Willie was the fourth. His name is William Jennings Bryan Style, but we just called him. His papa gave him that name, and he was the fourth, and I was fifth. And Frances, my sister, was sixth, and Jesse was seventh. That's my brother, and my baby brother David was the baby brother. So
And you said your sister, you called her Sis, but what was her real name?
Mary Logan, and she never wanted that name. She didn't like that name Logan, so we just wanted her. She wanted us to call her sister.
Can you recall a special memory about each one of your brothers and sisters, or about some of them?
Well, my oldest brother, we always looked up to him. He seemed to be the smartest one in the family, so we know whatever he told us was true. And then, of course, I had another brother that was very determined, was Henry. If you said the river went one way, he'd say it went the other. And then he felt like he was, after my father died and my mother remarried, that he had to take care of us children. So he told us, he said, don't you worry. He went up on the hill and got him a big sapling and brought it down. He said, don't you kids worry. I've took care of you all your life, and I'll still take care of you. And if he ever lays a hand on you, I'll beat him with a stick. That's what he told us. And we never had another worry. We knew he would do it.
What about Jesse? He had a distinguished military career, didn't he?
Yes. Oh, he's got all kind. If you go to his house, he's got all of his hallway lined with all of his stuff.
Where did you grow up?
In Hodgenville, Ruhr County.
So you had a house. Did you all sleep in one bed or one room, or how did that work out?
We didn't have very many rooms. Several of them, slept. The smallest ones we slept with our parents, and then we just slept somewhere where we could keep warm. We lived in a house that the air could come in, and we didn't have very much when we were little.
When you were little, did you get into any mischief or do anything bad when you were a little child?
Yes, I did one terrible thing. Me and my brother, Jesse, we kind of was together, and we did things together. And we had a place under the floor built for our dogs. And so we were going to play a joke on my sister. We didn't really intend to hurt her. And we told her under there was some beautiful things. If she'd go in there, she could bring them out to us. So she went in, and when she went in, we locked her in. And then that's the only whipping I ever got from my mother, and that wasn't too bad.
Now let's change gears. Since it's Christmas time, let's talk about Christmas. Was there a special, memorable Christmas, something that you really remember when you were young? A certain Christmas?
Yes, I remember when we were all small. We didn't have nice things like they have nowadays. We all had a little stone jar, and we prepared that for Santa Claus. And he left our gifts on that. We'd get fruit, and then we'd get one gift. And we were so happy.
What about a special gift that you ever got? Maybe a doll or something that you really liked?
Well, my mother went to the store, and she come home and she said, I've got you a doll for Christmas, and it's unbreakable. And I thought, well, I never heard of an unbreakable doll. So after I got the doll, I got me a hammer, and I hammered on his head, and it just broke all to pieces. And I went to her crying, and I said, Mom, this doll's not unbreakable. So she went back to the store and got me another one.
What about when you were little? Did you ever have any close calls that you could have got hurt really bad or even died
Yes.
that you were saved from?
One time I was, I always loved animals, and I always wanted to take care of them. And we had farm animals and dogs and cats and stuff. But I was up on, our well had a top built where you could stand 1 foot on one side and one on the other and draw water. And I wasn't very old. I doubt if I was more than 8 years old. And I was on this well drawing water, and I nearly fell in. And it was about 100 foot deep, so that would have been the last of me. And then another time, they had a tree across the creek, and it was at flood stage. And I had to go see my friend, so I got over there all right. And I always wore a hat. And when I came back, I was crossing the tree, and my hat fell off, and I reached down to get it, and I almost fell in. But my hat just floated on down the stream, but I didn't fall in.
So at least 2 different times that you could have.
2 times, yeah. It was real bad times.
Let me talk some about school and what it was like when you were little. Tell me what it was like to go to school.
Well, we had fun. We had to walk 3 miles to school there and 3 miles back. And we didn't have toothbrushes and things that days. And as we went to school, we'd break us a twig off of a tree. We had to have our teeth brushed before we went to school. And we brushed our teeth with that. After we'd eat breakfast, we didn't have our food out. We had to brush that out with that thing we got off the tree, that brush.
What kind of things did you do in school?
Oh, well, we had a real long recess. We played all kinds of games, and we had races and, different things, and I always won the races. And then one thing I was good at was spelling, and I always was at the head of the class. And one girl came in, and I couldn't spell umbrella, but I've never forgot to spell it. And I flubbed up on it, and she came along and spelled, and I thought, oh, why did she have to come to our school? And I wasn't head speller anymore.
How long did you go to school? Till what grade?
To the 8th grade, I'm sorry. I would have gone longer, but tell about Bobby not letting me go to school.
Well, I'll ask you about that in a little bit.
But
So after the 8th grade, you had to quit school,
I
though.
had to drop out.
What about when you were young and you still lived in the country? Is there something you did that was really brave?
Oh, yes, boys at the bridge. My sister, she was 5 years younger than me, but I wasn't too old, probably more than 12. And these 4 boys came up behind us, and they said, we'll meet you at the bridge. And Frances began to cry, and I said, Frances, why are you crying? She said, those boys are going to hurt us. I said, don't you know I carry something along with me to take care of people like this? And when we got to the bridge, there was no boys. And my grandchildren wouldn't believe that until I had to prove it by my sister. They thought I was just kidding. But that's a true story.
And she stated that it was true. She vouched for you.
Yes, you all believed it then.
Oh, yeah. But there were 4 boys, and you scared them off.
4 boys. Now, can you imagine? And does this go on now while I'm talking?
Oh, yeah, it's still going.
Well, I wanted to say about that. After I moved after y'all's house, that this somebody walked up behind me. I thought it was somebody I knew. And I looked up and it was a strange man. And he said, "Don't be afraid." I said, why should I be afraid?" So he stopped and he walked on, and then he said, "Well, I'm going in here." And I said, "Well, I'm going where I started at the first time."
But going back to the country, did anybody else besides your mother and father and your brothers and sisters, did anybody else ever live with you?
Yes, after my father died, my grandfather lived with us. I took care of him. I'd take his shoes off at night and help him get his clothes on and get him in bed. And when he got up in the morning, he'd say, "Gertrude, if you hadn't helped me last night, I wouldn't be here."
What was his name?
Cecil Davis. Cecil was his name.
And your mother's name was Lucinda?
Lucinda. She wouldn't have Lucinda. Lou's all she had. Lucinda.
And then you mentioned your father dying. How old were you when he died?
I was about 8, I guess.
And how did he die?
Well, he broke his hip and he got pneumonia.
But you said he was old when your
Oh,
parents
yes,
got
yes,
married
he was
anyway.
80. He was 80.
He was 80 when he died.
Mhm.
And that would have been about 1920 or so?
Yeah, maybe in 1919. David was born 1920.
So he was just really young when his father died.
Oh, yeah, he's just 15 months old.
So he broke his hip and
No, he's 9 months old.
but he fell and broke his hip
Fell and broke his hip.
got pneumonia from that.
And see, they didn't have medicine for that. And I think I just had pneumonia in July.
And you're still doing great. Well, when he died, what did you do for money? How did you make it? Since he was a preacher, how did you get money to eat
My
with?
mother carried the mail, and we had one big fat horse. She could just get into the shafts of the buggy. She carried the mail, and then on Sunday morning when we went to church, this horse stopped at every mailbox that Mom put mail in on the weekdays, you know. And we never did break her from that. She always stopped to let the mail get out.
So it took you a long time to get to church then,
Yeah.
didn't it?
We finally got her trained a little bit so she could go a little faster. But she could just barely get in there. She was a beautiful thing. We just loved her. We loved all of our animals.
When you left the country to move to Louisville, how old were you then?
I was 16. I was tired of the country. I don't care for the country too much now.
So who did you live with?
I lived with my Uncle Jesse Davis, Mama's brother, one of Mama's brothers.
And so you were 16 years old?
Uh-huh.
And where did you work?
I worked at grocery biscuit companies, making crackers, packing crackers in big barrels.
So could 16-year-olds work legally back then?
No, I told a little story.
So-
I said I was 18.
So they let you work and you
Well,
were...
they didn't question things like they do now. But I have repented of that because I had to work. Didn't want to stay in the country. So, well, that was like Abraham. He said that Sarah was his sister. And so he told her little one too, didn't he?
So how much did you make when you were working at the cracker company?
Oh, mercy. I made a fortune. I made $8 a week and worked 60 hours. We worked on Saturday.
So you worked 60 hours.
For $8 a week.
And so what did you do with that $8?
Well, we paid us 3 girls, Nellie and Frances and I. We lived in.
So you weren't living with your uncle at this time, right?
No, we had moved. We got tired of living with him. And besides, his daughter was kind of wild. She tried to lead me astray. And her brother said, "Gertrude, don't you associate with Irene because she'll lead you wrong." And she did try to, but I outwitted her. Let's see, and we paid our rent, and we bought our groceries, and I sent Mama $3 a week, and I said, "You don't wash after I leave." I was a chief washer. You pay somebody to do your washing, and I sent her $3 a week. And they didn't charge that much for washing then.
You were talking about your cousin Irene and you outwitted her. How did you outwit her?
Well, I tell you what you done. See, I came from the country to the city, and I didn't know anything but just about the pigs and chickens and horses and things. Well, she's going to take me to the show. Well, I thought, I didn't know anything about a show, you know, and I thought, well, it'd be fun. So we went there, and when we got there, they had a naked woman in a picture frame. And I got up and I said, "Listen here, you take me home this very minute." She said, sit down. I said, I'm not sitting down. I said, you take me home. So she fussed at me all the way home because I made her take me out of that nude show. She tried everything in the world. She took me out one time in, they had those little cars that just hold 3 people. And she took me out. And, I was going with her. She invited me to go with her. So I didn't know there'd be a man in the car. So we got in the car, and I said, where am I going to sit? She said, in his lap. Well, and of course, I didn't want to be rude, so I sat down. And then I don't know what I should tell about her on this. But anyhow, they got out of the car and went for a walk, I don't know if they're picking flowers or what they were doing, but I had other ideas. And she said, get out. I said, I'm not getting out of this car. And he said to her, leave her alone. She don't have to get out. Now, see, they could have, isn't that awful? See what I really went through in my childhood? Wanting me to get out.
But you stayed on the straight and narrow path.
Yes, I stayed. I had to sit on his lap, but that's all I did.
Well, it wasn't too long after that you got married, was it? So
it.
how did you meet your husband? Or tell me what his name was.
Robert Southern, yes.
And so how did you meet him?
Well, where we were living in this apartment, he had a friend, and I can't think of his friend's name, but they played music together. So one night they gathered down at our landlord's house, and they called us 3 girls down there to listen to the music. And his friend introduced me and Bob, and from that on, I guess we just fell in love and just never looked at anybody else.
So he played music?
He played music, but I stopped that after we married.
Well, what did he play?
He played the guitar.
So did you ever play any music? Or did you ever play music with him?
No. And the reason I stopped the music was because he wanted me to go with him one time. And we went to this gathering, and they did things that I didn't think was right. And when I come home, I said, don't you ask me to go with you anymore because I'm not going. So he went one more time. He begged me to go, but I wouldn't go. And then that's the last time he ever went. And sis, she always blamed me for him stopping playing music. But I wasn't going in that trashy crowd.
How long did you court before you got married?
About a year.
And so what was he like?
Well, he was a good father. He really loved his children. Of course, he went into the war and gave his life if it had been possible. Well, he did die from injuries from the war. And he loved his children. And after he left, then I took over what I thought and what he thought, and that together, those children were safe.
Well, what was his job before he went into the military?
He worked at, he was let's see, he worked in a factory they made things. What would give him?
Like an assembly worker?
Yes.
So he put things together.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the places you lived together. Like when you first got married, did you have your own place, or did you live in apartments, or live with family?
Yeah, we lived at one of his sisters, Edna. She was one of the sweetest people I ever met. So we lived with them a few months, and then.
And Edna was married to Orville at that time?
Yes, but she was one of the sweetest people I ever met. And then we got us a little apartment to ourselves. We left her and went to a little apartment on Winkler Avenue, and Jenny was born there. And we stayed there I don't know how long we did live there. And then, of course, Bob wasn't too well, he was injured in the war, and so he couldn't work a lot. And 2 years before he died, he hadn't worked, and so we had to move in with his other sister. And
that was Carrie Ethel?
Carrie Ethel, and she wasn't too nice to us. And I had to sit her down many times about Janie. Because she would love to spank her, but she had to spank both of us, and she wasn't going to tackle that.
Let me ask a couple of questions about history from that time. What about the Great Depression? Do you remember anything about that or how it affected you?
Not very much, because we lived, we'd been living there as after the war, wasn't it?
No, that was before the war. But that was probably in the late 20s or early 30s, but sounds like you worked the whole time.
Yeah.
You were never out of work.
No, that's one of the things I would be working now if I could walk right.
What about the flood in 1937? Do you remember that?
Yes, we were all at we were all at Etna's house, and that was really something. I'm telling you, the water came up to the house, and we had to leave. And the one of her cousins brought nightgowns, beautiful nightgowns for all of us to wear in that all of that mucky stuff. And then we had to leave there, and we went to Hodgenville to Etna's husband's people, and we stayed there till after the flood. But it was terrible, and that was the first time I ever had to get on a boat to ride out of the water. Scared me to death.
So you had to take a boat to get out of your house?
Yeah, her head was up. Her house was high. The water would have been in, soon.
Where was her house?
It was right across from a nice old church.
On Haywood or on M Street?
Haywood. Girl who lived on M Street.
What about your children? Janie was your first child. How old
Yeah.
were you when you had her?
I guess I don't remember how old I was.
About 25 or so?
Yeah, because I married when I was 23.
And so what was her full name? She wasn't Janie, she was
Betty Jane.
Betty Jane. How did you decide on that name?
Well, Jane was for Mama's name. My mother's name was Lucinda Jane. So I named her Jane for Mama. And then I named her other grandmother was Bob's mother. Her name was Elizabeth, so I named her Betty. I wanted to name her Elizabeth. So I named her after his mother.
When World War II broke out, what was that like?
It was terrible.
When my grandfather went into the Army, did he enlist or did he get drafted?
No, he enlisted.
And so, do you know where he fought in the war? He fought in Europe, didn't he?
Yeah.
So then, while I don't know if this is during the war, but I can't remember if he was gone or not. There's a story that my dad wanted me to ask you about the bananas.
Oh, yes. Who was I saving the bananas for?
I think you were saving them for him.
Oh, yeah.
Because you made his lunch.
Yeah, I made his lunch. So, I went to the grocery and I got a big bag of bananas, and of course I hadn't put my groceries away. So Janie, she went in and got her a little basket and piled all the bananas in the basket and took them out and passed them out in the neighborhood to the children. But I finally got out there in time to save some of them. I said, now you all share these bananas that you have, but these are for Betty Jane's dad. He has to take them in his lunch. So they all had bananas.
So how old was she when she did that?
Well,
a little girl?
Well, I don't imagine she's more than 3 or 4. She was little. But she's got that giving from me. Give. She always shared everything she had.
When the war was over, how did everybody act?
They acted happy. We went to church and everybody was happy. And we were kind of acting Pentecostal. And this one old evil man got up and made some kind of slur against the flag, and they just got hold of him and took him out of church because he didn't belong there. Everybody was happy to be there in church and that God had protected us and give us a place to worship.
Mm-hmm. After the war, of course, was the baby boom generation, and my dad was one of the baby boomers. When was he born?
He was born August the 16th. And when he was born...
Well, what year was that?
It was 48. Born 48. And he was a good father. And I had been sick before that, and he followed me everywhere, I went and took care of me. And then when, no, I have to stop it out that much. When Bobby was born, they told me that he went out and he jumped over all the fences in our neighborhood.
So he was really excited about that.
And he really loved his children. And he was a good father.
Well, how did you choose my dad's name?
Well, I chose Robert, but then I wanted to name him Robert Thurman after his father. And Bob said, no, you don't name him Thurman. But I wish now I had disobeyed, because I have disobeyed other people and put that on the birth certificate. But he wouldn't have it. He hated that name, Thurman. And so many people now think that name's pretty.
Well, where did Jean come from?
Well, that was another man's name. I put that there.
So was he another boyfriend or
No,
just a name
I
you
can't
knew?
think even who I named him after. But that's, I had to think of something to put on the record.
Well, tell me, what was my dad like when he was a child?
When he was a child, I said, well, he
Was he
was
well behaved?
he was the only boy. He lived in a family with 3 girls, so you can imagine what he went through.
What do you mean with 3 girls?
Etna and Ethel and Gretel and Nettie.
Oh no, I'm talking about my dad. What was he like when he was a little boy?
When he was a
Yeah, so
yeah, I'm thinking about his parents. Aren't I? Yeah. Well, he was a good little boy. He's like little Rob. I think of Bobby when I think of little Rob. He never cried and he never disobeyed after he got to the age where he knew what to do. Now when they say no, he's little Rob stops. But we didn't have a lot of things that he had to stop for. So he was good. I never had no trouble with him. Never disobeyed me. So of course we went to church every Sunday, and every other day the church was open. And he was the best little boy in church. And the preacher's wife even said, "Is that little boy that good at home?" And I said, "Yes, he is." And he was. But that morning he did everything that he could think of. So I told him the first time, "Now you be quiet or I'll spank you when I get you home." He did it the second time, and I told him the same thing. And the third time I said, "I'm going to spank you when I get you home." So we got almost inside of the house, and he said, "Mama, are you going to spank me?" And I said, "Yes, I told you I would." So I turned him across my knee, and I hit him 4 times. If I'd been loving him, and I hit him harder than that more times. And he cried, and I cried too, so that's all the whipping he ever had. But he was one, Rob is just like, just a good boy. You tell him no, and he looks at you a little hard, but he stops.
So you only got one whipping in your life, and he only got one whipping in his life.
Yeah, and I needed more than that, I'm sure, but Bobby didn't. But Mama, that's the only time she ever whipped me, and it was a switch. But we never fastened Francis under the floor anymore.
What about at the Bible school picnic? Was my dad always well behaved at the Bible school picnics?
Yes, he was. But this one time they were serving those drinks that, what were those drinks they served?
Ginger ale?
It was a drink that was different. They'd served us something that had a different bottle, and I said, "Well, I've never seen this bottle before." And Bobby said, "Oh, yes, you." I said, "That looks like a beer bottle." And Bobby said, "Well, yes, you do." Said, "You drink it every night." And I never said anything because I was teaching Sunday school and went to church, and I thought, well, if they believed that, I couldn't help it. Can you imagine him doing a thing like that?
Saying that you drank beer every night?
Yeah, drink beer every
Mercy.
night.
What about his cowboy boots?
Oh, his father left 2 things I wanted to keep as keepsakes, was his boots and his hat. That was his favorite thing. But Bobby wanted his hat, and I let him have his hat for a little while. And then I put it up, but he wouldn't give up his boots. And he'd go up, we lived in an apartment upstairs, and he'd go up and down them steps in his father's boots. You can imagine he did make noise, but that didn't bother me. But it bothered the neighbors downstairs. So they went over and told my landlord, and told the man I worked for. And of course he took me in as one of his family, and they couldn't talk about me to, you know. So, but then Miss Davis come to me. She said, "You're going to have to keep Bobby quiet going up those steps. They just can't tolerate that." And I said, "All right." I said, "You tell them to move upstairs, and I'll move downstairs. And when they're ready to move, I'll go." So that's all I heard about that.
So you never had to move?
And then his wife told a lie on Jenny, and that made me mad. That wasn't true. They were jealous of me because Mr. Davis thought so much of me. One time, when he gave me my paycheck, well, they paid us in money, and he had $10 over in my paycheck. So I brought it then back to work, you know, and I said, "You've put $10 in my paycheck. I don't make that much." He said, "I don't make mistakes." And he wouldn't take that 10. Now he just put that in there for me. And a lot of times she'd go around putting $10 bills in my pocket, and she said, "I just tell nobody." And I did.
When my dad was little, what did his hair look like?
Oh, he had beautiful curls, and I just kept it fixed.
Did he keep it in curls forever?
No, he didn't. One time he went to the, after he got old enough to go to the barber shop, I never dreamed he'd have his hair cut off. And so he went and had his hair. He didn't have it cut off, he had it, I guess, clippered, wasn't it?
Like a flat top?
Flat top. He come in, he had his coat over his head, and I said, "Why are you wearing your coat on your head?" And he took his coat off, and he didn't have any hair, and I nearly passed out. So then I got mad at the barber. And he always came in, and he wouldn't eat beans that were left for the next day, green beans. And I always had to him as fresh. And I said, "You won't hear no fresh green beans from me anymore, the way you ruined my baby's hair." He said, I asked him if his mother knew that, and he said yes. So he told a story.
He should have been spanked for that, shouldn't he?
Well, he was using his way instead of mine. It's like he wanted. Then he had it cut like that all the time. He had beautiful hair.
Not very long after the war, not very long after my dad was born, my grandfather died. Can you tell about when and how he died?
Who?
My grandfather, Bob.
Oh, Bob. Yeah, okay. Can I tell you what?
Yeah, tell me what he died of and about when that was.
He had injuries, of course, from the war, and he died of, I guess it would be a heart attack, and he bled to death. And they wouldn't let me stay in there with him that morning, that night. He was in there with two other men, you know. And the nurse came in, and she said, "You'll have to go out." And those men said, she said, "There's other people in this room," and those men said, "No, she don't have to go out, she can stay." And so she kept on, you know, I guess they called the police on him or something. And so they said, "If you go out, he'll die." And he did. And that's one thing I like to never got over that.
Well, you said there was that you were, you knew that he was not doing real well, and that one time he had asked you to do something for him when you were living with Gary Ethel.
Oh yes, we were living, and she wasn't too kind to us, and he was all the brothers you had. I don't know how she could treat him that way, but he wasn't well, and he went up to get me a chicken to fix for lunch. And when he came back, he said, "Honey, would you fix me a sandwich?" And I said, "Well, I sure will." Went in the kitchen, and she was fiddling around in there, and I fixed him a sandwich, and she said, "I hope you're not going to carry that into him." I said, "Well, I certainly am, and don't you say a word." But after she found pickles in the icebox that he left, he had those big long pickles, you know. And she cried and cried and cried over that, but see, that was too late. But she didn't say nothing to him, because, well, it would have been a terrible thing.
But you said something that might be his...
I said, "And don't you say nothing to them, that may be his last time he comes home."
And it was, wasn't it? Well, after he died, how did you make it as far as the money? What did you do?
Well, we stayed there, and of course we got Social Security, and of course the children got that till they were 8. And we lived there with this sister-in-law, and
then you also worked. Where did you go to work?
yeah, I worked at Grocery Biscuit. That's
At
not
Davis's?
Grocery Biscuit. I worked at Davis Donut. And that's the one. And they really took care of me there.
Did you ever have any run-ins with any of your coworkers, or did everything always
Well, I
go
never did
smooth?
have a run-in with any of the co-workers, but one Sunday we had to work on Sunday too. We were awful busy, and Miss Davis, she was a little bit high-tempered, and some of her friends come in, and nobody had got to them, and she hollered, screamed. Oh, she had such a loud voice. "For you to get down there and wait on these people." I went down there and waited on them. And then after they left, she was washing dishes. I went down. I said, "Don't you never call my name out like that again." She embarrassed me to death.
Oh, what about some? Did you ever have any food fights or anything in the bakery, or any mischief like that?
We didn't have any food fights. Is that about?
Well, did you ever get anything smashed in your face or anything like that?
When I was worked on the bakery side, and I had to go back and forth and get my stuff to put in my shelves, and I went back, and this one baker, he's the one that they were jealous of me because Mr. Davis liked me better than he did them. And he said, come over here and smell of these brownies. Now, you can't smell brownies. They'd smell bad. Brownies wouldn't smell bad. I should have had more sense. And I went over there and he smashed them up my nose. And he had a cigarette in his mouth. I'll never forget. I jerked that cigarette out of his mouth and I said, I'll get even with you. He said, well, do it tomorrow if that's your day off. So it was. But all that next day I had to think. And the next morning I came in and they made those great big marine pies.
Meringue?
Coconut.
Uh-huh.
Coconut meringue. So I picked me out the nicest, prettiest, biggest, best one. And I put it in my icebox. And I went back to the bakery time after time to get my things. And he always watched me because he thought I'd do something. But it was up almost noontime, and I went back, and he was at the icebox, and I called his name, and he looked up, and when he did, I smashed it in his face. Oh.
And did he ever get you back after that?
No, he didn't. I said, listen, if you're not satisfied with this, you just call the day and the time, and we'll settle it. But he never did call the time, so.
Before you went back to work, you were going to go back to school and get your education, weren't you?
He did. And this little son of mine, I went one morning and he cried. But the second morning I got to go and I thought, well, no, I can't go off and leave him like this every day. But I went that morning. But I went on for a few months and I was doing real good in school, learning to type. And I learned that you don't say wash, you say wash. That was the first thing I learned. You know, country people said wash. And I never did forget that. So I could have learned. But I thought he was more important than his father left him when he was 15 months old, so I didn't leave him. I stayed home and took care of him.
So you never did finish up your
I
school?
never did finish my school. I'm still as dumb.
Well, I don't know about that. Well, you've mentioned several times about going to church. Where did you go to church in Louisville?
It's in Louisville. Would that been? No, I went to. Can't think of that church for it. Yeah, I went to Ninth and O.
And you taught Sunday school there, right? Do you know how
Yes.
long?
Yes, I taught the 6, 7, and 8-year-old primaries. They had them all together then. We had 150 primaries in one grade, big room. Had several teachers and all of it. And I guess it was close to 50 years if it wasn't 50.
So you spent a long time teaching.
And I sure miss that now, you know. I'd love to. I can't, you know, you have to be really up to par to teach that age children. I'd love to help in your class with your one, but my voice don't hold up.
Well, what about driving? Did you ever learn how to drive?
No, I tried to. I scared everybody to death. Jenny thought I was going to run into a building one time. She tried to teach me, and Bobby tried, and they just all give up. And now I just grieve because I didn't learn to drive. But I guess at 87 they wouldn't let me drive probably anyway.
Or maybe not.
Have
Well, what about bowling? If you never learned to drive, did you ever go bowling?
Yeah, but that was Douglas.
No, that was Bobby.
Bobby insisted that I get out, you know, and so he loved bowling, so he took me bowling, and so he gave me the ball, and he said, now you throw it down there. So I took the ball up over my head and threw it down the alley. He said, oh my gracious, I'm glad they didn't see you because they'd run us both out. He never did ask me, but I beat him in bowling.
And so did you go bowl with him a lot after that?
No, I didn't. He wouldn't take me anymore. Because, see, I embarrassed him and then I beat him. I got the highest score.
What about, he wanted me to ask you about some home improvement projects, about oiling the fan. Can you tell me that story?
Oh, yes, I always oil everything. When anything squeaks, I say it needs oil. So if people don't do it, then I oil it. So I oiled it once, and then I oiled it twice. But the twice the oiling was too much and it just caught on fire.
So if 1 quart's good, 2 quarts is
Yeah,
better, right?
Give
But maybe
it
not.
plenty, yeah.
Well, it wasn't, well, I guess sometime a few years later you married Pete. So can you tell me a little bit about him?
Well, I was married to him 13 years, and I don't remember. I did know, but that's going to happen. I tried to forget all that stuff about him. but I will tell you, he was good to me, very good to me. But the best thing, he was good to Bobby, and of course I could take care of myself. And he had a beautiful Buick convertible, and when Bobby got to the age to drive a car, I said, now I want you to get Bobby some kind of a car, because I don't want him riding with the drunks. So he went and bought him a car, and he brought it home, and then he looked at it, and he drove it, and he said, oh, this is not for Bobby. And he gave him his Buick convertible. You know that beautiful car he had? Did you see it? Boy, it was a beautiful thing. And he gave that to Bobby. And how could I not think of him and think bad about him when he was so good to Bobby? That's really all that mattered to me. But he was good to me. If I would go out and see something, and I'd say, oh, isn't that pretty? Then the next day he'd bring that home to me. He was good to me. Something happened to him in his last years. I don't know what it was.
Well, you traveled a lot together, didn't you?
Oh, yes. We'd go sometimes 4 weeks on vacation.
So you've seen just about most of the United
All of
States,
it.
haven't you?
I think it's 2 of the countries, and I don't know which one, 2 that is.
Of the states.
States, yeah.
Well, after he died, then what did you do after that?
Well, I lived in our house for a while, and then my Sunday school teacher went to church where I did, and she invited me to come live with her.
And who was that?
That was Miss Broom. She's in heaven now. And so I said, well, I'll have to think about it. So I just thought about it that night, and then the next night was prayer meeting, so I told her I was ready to move in. And she was a mother to me. She treated me just like her daughter.
And she lived at the house that was real close to the church, right?
Yes,
It's right next to the laundromat on.
Yeah. And I did the laundry.
Is it Winkler, or is that where Taylor Boulevard?
Winkler. That's
Okay.
Winkler. And let me tell you a funny thing about her. See, she was 80-something, and I'd come in from work some night, and she'd say, I know there's some dust upon that icebox. And so she knew I'd get up there and clean it off. And then one time, her bed wasn't right. She said that I was going to have to fix her bed, and I said, no, she wanted me to, said there was dust on her springs. And I said, well, Miss Broom, I can't lift those springs off. So there was some men lived next door. So I went over and got them, and they lifted the springs off, and I cleaned her bed for her. She always had dust on something.
When you were living with Miss Broom, you had your Social Security check. What were your plans then?
Well, I put my first, they gave me really a bonus besides my Social Security check the first time. They gave me $1,100. So I put it in the bank. And I worked then, and I was going to put my Social Security check in every month. And I was going to be a rich old lady. And you want me to tell what I ended up doing?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't, I put the $1,100 in there, but I hadn't put too many checks in there till my son came and said, could you come and take care of the children? And I said, well, I sure can. I was 65 then. And I went out on Westport Road and took care of 3 little boys. Dougie was 3, and and James was what? How old was James?
About 6, I think.
And you was 8, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a wonderful time. Things I said I'd love to do it all over again if I could crawl around like we used to. All 4 of us would get, we had a great big, we lived in a beautiful house, a great big family room. And it was big enough for us to crawl all around the family room. And there we would go crawling. That was good for our health.
Okay, now we're going to switch gears and shift back from Westport Road. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But can you tell me about some of the pets that you've had?
Well, I had a dog named Hector. And so my husband said, well, he gets on the bed when you're not, Hector gets on the bed, and I said, oh, no, he doesn't. So I think he must have put the dog up there. I don't think Hector got on the bed. And he made a picture of him on the bed.
But what color was Hector?
He was black.
And what happened to Hector?
Well, he got out and he went off one night, and I looked for him the next day, looked everywhere. And is that the one that they killed? And I searched all around in the neighborhood. Then when I come back near home, I saw him laying there on the sidewalk, and I know someone killed him because there wasn't any blood. If he'd carbonated him, there'd been blood. And the boys down the street, they would tease him, and their father said, "You better get rid of that dog." And I said, "I keep my dog at home, but I know they had found him and they'd killed him." And I brought him across the parking lot, and that was when I can't think of the preacher's name, and I was crying, you know. And I said, "They've killed my dog," and he cried too. Well, that was funny, but I really did cry over Hector here.
And then what about after Hector? Did you get another dog?
That's when I got Fluffy. Yeah, that's when I worked at the bakery. And one day, the men came in, they said, there's a dirtiest little dog outside. So I went out and looked, and it was Fluffy. And she was hungry and dirty. And I went down in the icebox and got her ham and a pan of water. Now, I'm on the job. That's how they tolerated me. And I got the ham and the water, and I fed her, you know, big bunches of ham and water. And the bakery boys put her in a little shed. And when I left for work, she was gone. Well, it just worried me. And I was going to take her home and try to find her who she belonged to, you know, but she was so dirty, somebody throwed her out. But before they left that night, she come back again, and they brought her to me.
And so how did she get her name?
Fluffy. Of course, she had almost as pretty hair as Douglas did.
Just a big ball of fluff?
Uh-huh.
What about other pets that you had later?
Fluffy. I didn't have any later.
Well, when you lived in LaGrange?
Oh, yes, and then we had Precious. And I was sitting there crocheting, which I do most all the time, and Valerie came in, that's my daughter-in-law, and she said, "Those dogs have killed Fluffy," and there me and her both.
You mean Precious?
Precious. See, I call everything Fluffy. And me and her was out there in that front yard screaming and crying over Fluffy. But Bobby told him, he said, "Now, see, they were vicious dogs. Well, they could have eat me up sometime when I went walking like that." He said, "I'm going to tell you one thing. If those dogs ever get in my yard, they won't walk out. They'll have to come down and get them." And they never did. Boy, they fixed them fences up after they killed poor little Precious. She was so... Yeah, and I wasn't... when I moved out there, now I loved Fluffy, but I never did let Fluffy sleep with me. I didn't let her on my bed. So, I don't know why, dogs just love me. And Fluffy followed me down to my bedroom, and she got over in the big chair.
You mean Precious?
Precious. And I was getting ready for bed. And she looked at me, oh, so lovingly, and I thought, can I let that dog get on my bed? Because I said, but I told them when I went, I said, "Now, I didn't let Fluffy get on my bed, and I won't let Precious." But I said, "Come on over," and boy, she ought to learn to sleep with me all the time after that.
And after Precious, were there any more dogs?
Oh, yes, there was that masterpiece, Coco. And of course, Coco slept on the bed.
But she's up in Michigan now.
And she's in Michigan, and then she was in Washington, and I sure didn't want to go to that state. And I don't know if Michigan's going to be any better.
Well, what about, we'll talk about Westport Road again. How about any yard work that you might have done there?
Well, the lawn was just in a mess. The weeds, and I just was going to get rid of those dandelions. So I had to dig up the whole yard, us and the 3 boys. But
By hand?
Huh?
By hand,
Yes.
right? How long did that take you to do it?
Well, it took us a long time, but we got it all up.
Well, what about from there? Where did you go? From Louisville? From the house on Westport Road, where did you move next?
Oh, we moved to LaGrange.
And you didn't want to go and live in a dungeon, right? So what did you ask for?
I told him I wanted a big window. Well, Bobby came and told me before we moved out there, he said, "We've got you a big window." And I said, "Well, good." And when I went out there, it was about 2 foot wide. Well, it wasn't that much, was it?
It's about that, probably.
And I said to him, "Well, I'm sure glad you didn't make me a little window."
But did he
Well,
think that was funny?
I don't know where he liked it or not, but that's the way I felt about it. I said a big window and then sticking that little old. I wanted a window like that, where I could see out. I could see out and see the garbage cans. And
Well, what about from LaGrange? Where did you go next?
I came to Lexington.
Hmm. Oh, I forgot to ask you. How long were you in LaGrange?
Let's see, we were there how many years?
It's about 15 years,
15
wasn't it?
years. Oh yeah, we was there 15 years. And I've been here. This is going on what 3 years.
Hmm. 2.5 years.
Been here 2 Christmases.
Hmm.
I had a wonderful time. They've treated me good, and they feed me, but I don't gain any weight. But I guess it'd be too much for me to carry around. But I eat and sleep and do little things.
Oh, I skipped one of my questions I need to go back to. Have you ever broken any bones?
Yes, I broke my finger. That was the first break I ever had. And the
How did you break it?
Well, the landlady didn't do it purposely, but she locked the front door, and I didn't have my key. It's supposed to have been open when I went back. So I got me a milk carton and put it by the window, and climbed up to get the window open, and I fell, and I had a brick in my hand. Can you imagine? I wonder I didn't hurt my hand worse than that. Had this brick, and I was going to get the window open, and the only thing I done was broke my finger. And then at the hospital, when they took the cast off, they sewed my arm, and I told them, I said, "You're sewing my arm." They said, "Oh, no, we're not." And they took the cast off, and they said, "Well, we sewed her arm." And I said, "Well, I told you you were."
What about anything else? How about a broken arm?
I said, never broke arm, broken ribs.
Well, you had a broken arm one time from the daycare.
Oh, yes, how did I do that? Oh, I fell.
And then did anybody else have a broken arm about that same time?
James, and he came by and he said, "Grandma, I know how you feel."
So after that, it was several years before you broke anything else. What was the next thing that you broke?
That was my hip. That was the worst thing.
So you fell and broke your hip, and then how did you try to get better from that? Did you take some physical therapy?
Yeah.
And what was part of your physical therapy? Like swimming or anything like that?
Oh, yes, and I had to go to this pool, and you had to have a bathing suit. And my mama told me when I was a little girl, she said, well, when I got ready to come to Louisville, she said, "Now, I don't you to never put on a bathing suit." And I said, "I won't." And I didn't. I kept her word. And how old was I when I broke my hip? I kept her word until I was
Probably about 82.
82. And so they said, the doctor said, you have to go to the pool. So I said to Mama, "Mama, I can't help it. This is doctor's orders." So I put that, "You should have seen me in that swimming." Oh.
And anything else have you broken since then?
My ribs. That was the most painful. You never have that, did you? Oh, that's horrible. Now my hip never bothered me much with pain, but them ribs. Fell against the door and broke them ribs. Bobby had to get up at 4 o'clock and take me to the hospital one morning. I was in such pain I couldn't stand it. And Douglas had to take me one time before when I had that in my hand. And he said, "Now if I have to take you over there again at 4 o'clock, I'm going to leave you over there." But I didn't have to go anymore.
Well, let me go back to the hip. I forgot about something else. When you got into the hospital with your broken hip, what kind of medicine did they get you on?
Oh, something that made me crazy.
And what did you see when you were on that medicine?
I saw all things crawling on the wall, and I was falling out of the bed all the time. I was up real high. Every place I went, it was high, and I was falling. And that was terrible.
You were riding horses?
Yeah, oh yes. I had this big, beautiful white horse. It had that great big plume. I can still see it today. But then yet we was riding right on the edge of a cliff. But I was on that horse and I didn't fall.
Did you feel like anybody was coming to get you in the hospital?
Yes, lots of times.
What happened in the night one time at the hospital?
What did happen? I forgot.
With the nurses?
Oh, they was going to give me a shot. after they'd give me that shot that made me crazy. And I said, I'm not taking the shot. And they brought in 5 nurses. And I outwitted 5 nurses. And I said, you just let me go upstairs and call my son.
And so then he came, and then what happened?
And everybody was always high up. See, I was still on that stuff. And he was way up there and laughing. He said, what's happening down here? And I thought, my goodness, that's my son. I don't know where I should call him the son or not. I said, you have joined the rest of them.
So who did you say was going to take care of him?
Huh?
Who did you say would fix them all?
Was it you?
No, you said Valerie would come and fix them all.
Oh, yes, I said, Valerie will fix you all. She was, too. But the one nurse, now think of 5 nurses. And they said, well, I said, you all are going to cause me to have a heart attack, and you better all get out of here. So she said, well, we better leave her alone. They never gave me the shot. I wasn't taking another shot from her.
Well, I think you've mentioned this already, but what do you do for fun? What kind of pastimes do you have?
Oh, I go to church. It's my first spiritual thing. And then I crochet. And the senior citizens at our church, we have a home for unwed mothers, and we make little baby blankets for them. And I'm making one now.
So crocheting is one big one, and you make booties too.
Yeah, and I make booties. Yeah, and that's what people get for Christmas. For me, I can't shop, so they know what they're going to get before I give them the package.
Sometimes you give us a surprise though with socks and handkerchiefs.
Well, I knew you need those handkerchiefs, and I've got some more socks up there. Did you get both of your socks?
Mm-hmm.
Douglas finally found his. I hope Tim had his. And you know, I forgot that other Tim and Keith.
Mercy.
I hated that.
Well, let me ask you one last question, and then we'll close. What advice do you have on how to live a long and happy life?
Well, first you have to love the Lord and go to church and be a good Christian. And then when you have children, you have to be an example. Don't say, if you do something and they do it, don't say, don't do that. So just don't do that before them. And I know that Rob's going to be brought up, I guess he'll be a little Billy Sunday. He's going to be something great. I don't know what it's going to be. But he's got 2 good Christian parents, and they're going to live a life before him that's going to please the Lord.
Any other advice on how to live a long and happy life?
Oh, yes. You eat well. And I eat everything but sardines. And the doctor, I don't know why he prescribed them for me. Maybe he was trying to kill me. I don't know. But I eat everything. There's nothing that I don't like. I like everything.
And take your vitamins too, right?
I've took vitamins since I can remember. Take my vitamins every day.
Like Geritol?
No, who got me that Geritol?
I think that was my mother.
Yes. She said to you boys, she said, "Now, we've got to go and get Grandma some Geritol. She's got to get well." You know, she was good to me.
And so what happened when you took the Geritol?
Oh, mercy, I got sick. I just got awful sick. I guess that's too much iron, wasn't it? And then another thing, she gave me my first birthday cake. And so I said to, let's see who, Bobby was her husband. Bobby was your mama's husband. And I said to them, I said, you know, this is the first birthday cake I ever had. And Pete said to me, well, you never did say you wanted a birthday cake. I said, well, I didn't tell them I wanted a birthday cake. They just got it for me. It's the first birthday cake I ever had.
Well, any other advice on how to have a long and happy life?
Well, you don't smoke and drink, and you don't stay up too late at night. And don't worry. But I'm not the one to tell you that because I'm a worry boy. But I then check myself and say, now don't worry about this.
That's good. Any other final words you'd like to say before we go?
Well, I'm happy.
We've made it till January 1st, 2000, so we'll see if we
I
can make
never
it till
thought I would ever.
2099.
The 3 boys told me, they said, well, you'll make it till 2000. 2000, but I don't know why, because I was in good health. You know, I was in perfect health till I broke my hip. I could wash and iron, and I walked 2 miles every day and more than that sometimes. But now I can't walk more than 10 or 12 steps.
But you still do laundry,
I'm
right?
gonna have, yeah, I'm gonna get, when summer comes, I'm gonna get to walking now. I walk in here some, not enough, so.
Maybe we can conclude with one of your favorite Bible verses. Can you think of one that you would like to tell us?
Let's see.
Maybe
I've
from
got
Psalms?
Many of them. Yeah, the Lord is my shepherd. If I get kind of blue or upset, I go always.
What about, there's one that you pray every day, isn't there, from Psalms? I think it's 139.
You know, I'm not remembering like I should. I love the songs I read.
Maybe you could just tell us one of your favorite Bible verses then.
Bible verses. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life.
And where is that?
John 3:16. That's not where they told it, was it? Who was that? Said it was John. Was that you telling that?
Yeah, that was Al Gore saying it was John 16:3.
Oh yeah, Al Gore. Mercy, he don't know much. I've already forgotten one. He knows.
Mercy me.
Mercy me.
Well, anything else you want to say before we turn this off, Trudy?
I can't think. Only I just love y'all.
That's good words to part on.
And love little Rob a whole lot. And all of my family, of course.
Good. We'll say goodbye.
Goodbye.